Today on The Conservative Rebel, most Americans all across the political spectrum have been indoctrinated from childhood into supporting the left's morally depraved definition of liberty. You've probably been told that liberty is the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as you don't hurt anyone. Every word of that is a lie, and it's a lie that's destroying our country. In under half an hour, we'll discuss what liberty is, what liberty isn't, and what all of this means for you and the future of your country. You won't want to miss today's episode of The Conservative Rebel. Anyone who pays attention to partisan elections will notice a surprising pattern. Both the Republican and the Democrat candidate reliably use the exact same words to drum up support from voters. Words like liberty, democracy, and freedom. Both the Republican and the Democrat claim to be fighting for these noble things, and both the Republican and the Democrat claim the other party is destroying those things. That's why we'll reliably hear largely the same copy-and-paste feel-good platitudes from politicians of both parties every single election. Is this evidence that the partisan divide in our country isn't nearly as bad as we think it is? Is this proof that Americans still do share common values and ideals? Is this a much-needed reminder that there are good people on both sides, that we truly do have more in common with each other than we have dividing us? Of course not. The reason right-wingers and left-wingers use the same words isn't because we have anything in common. It's because we're so divided we mean completely different things, even though we're using the exact same words. The reason virtually every voter in the country thinks liberty and freedom are good is because liberty and freedom have become worse than useless words. They have deliberately been stripped of all meaning and of all objective definition. They can mean anything to anyone, anywhere. And that's why politicians love to use them so much. It's not because they're principled people who genuinely care about your rights. They couldn't care less about you or your rights or your interests, obviously. Instead, they use these words because they are perfect tools to exploit people's ignorance and drum up support for their campaigns and their causes. They're like the peanut butter a dog owner coats a pill with. A convenient way to cloak the darkness of their true designs and scam the population into eagerly eating up the filth they're trying to feed them. Today, we're going to try to give an objective definition to the most important word in the propagandist's toolkit, liberty. Because true liberty is the exact opposite of what you think it is. The leftists who dominate our culture deliberately conflate the incompatible concepts of liberty and license. License is the absence of restraint. License is the ability to do whatever you want, however you want, whenever you want, without anyone stopping you. Nothing is required of you, nothing is expected of you, you have no moral obligations to your family, to your country, to God. You are an atomized individual, totally separate from the rest of society. You're emancipated from all accountability to anyone other than yourself. The only thing you can never do, the only sin you must avoid, the only crime you can ever commit is the crime of interfering with the way others use their license. In the original Enlightenment liberal view, you could only do this by using force or violence on others. So, as long as you didn't kill anyone, you were basically free to do whatever you wanted. This is what the more old-school liberals believe in, which means this is what most establishment conservatives believe in, who, as you know, are mostly just Bill Clinton liberals. But the view of modern leftists is somehow even worse than this one. The most obvious reason is that modern liberals not only accept but worship violence, especially against the most vulnerable people in the world, like the 64 million unborn children these people have murdered in the US alone since Roe v. Wade, or the innocent children they castrate and mutilate in the name of transgenderism. Traditionally, the only moral requirement of liberalism was to not harm other people. But at least that was a real moral requirement. Violence against innocent people is objectively wrong. I hope we can all agree. But modern liberalism doesn't even have that moral requirement. The only moral requirement of modern liberalism is apathy, which isn't a moral requirement at all. All you have to do to be a good person is completely focus on yourself and your life, and avoid ever judging others for any of the terrible decisions they're making, or ever daring to suggest to anyone that there's such a thing as objective truth, or an objective moral law that they're breaking. The only moral requirement is that you commit the sin of apathy. Before, the one and only sin against liberalism was violence. Now, the one and only sin is moral judgment. Before, liberalism was immoral, but now liberalism is amoral. This is what license is. It's moral lawlessness. It's a recipe for depravity, chaos, and dysfunction. Whenever a leftist shrieks about liberty, freedom, rights, autonomy, choice, or any other good-sounding but conveniently undefined word, this is what he's demanding. He's demanding the destruction of the moral fiber of our society. In short, license is the absence of restraint, the absence of judgment, the absence of consequences, the absence of accountability. License means you get to do whatever you want and sin as much as you want. That is what the leftist means when he screams about liberty. But real liberty is a different thing entirely. But what is that different thing? We know what liberty isn't, but do we know what liberty is? The great British statesman Lord Acton came up with the best answer to that pressing question I've ever heard. As his famous quote goes, "Liberty is not the power of doing what we like, but the right to do what we ought." Liberty can't exist, in other words, without some form of restraint. Liberty isn't a value-neutral condition. It must be ordered toward the good. Just like the government needs to protect the life and property of its citizens in order for a free society to exist, it also has to protect religion and morality. It has to order freedom toward the good. This is what John Adams meant when he famously said, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions, unbridled by morality and religion. Our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." Because liberty is the right to do what we ought, it's impossible for an immoral, irreligious people to be free. Not because they'll abuse the liberty they have, but because they never had liberty in the first place. Definitionally, they cannot have it. As Benjamin Franklin said, only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. Leftists will be very angry at you, of course, if you ever dare to suggest this. You can't impose your morality on others, they'll say. Freedom of religion, separation of church and state. But when they say that, they don't really believe what they're saying. By telling us we're not allowed to impose our morality on others, they're imposing their liberal morality on us, even though they're too stupid to even realize it. In order to argue that you can't impose moral beliefs on others, they're forced to impose their moral beliefs on others. Their ideology is so insane that they can't even articulate it without proving themselves wrong. Just by making that argument, they destroy their entire worldview. In order for liberals to be right, they'd have to be wrong. The other weaponized, meaningless platitude you'll always hear these people bring up is, we need to respect other people's choices. Real liberty means you can live your life freely, making whatever choices you want. That's what we're told. We can never judge anyone's moral choices, anyone's lifestyle choices. Choice is deified. Never judge people for choices. You hear this especially in the abortion debate, where liberals advertise their satanic death cult dedicated to the mass murder of unborn children with the more palatable label pro-choice. We just think women should be able to make their own choices, they say. There's just one small problem with that logic. Some choices are bad. I know I probably just blew your mind there, so I'll say that one more time. Some choices are bad. Some choices, like abortion, are even off the charts evil. In fact, every single act of evil that has ever been committed in all of human history happened because someone made the wait for it choice to commit that act of evil. Just because someone made the choice to do something doesn't mean that we should let him do that thing. And it definitely doesn't mean that we're not allowed to judge him for that thing. So this idea that we can never ever restrict the choices other people make is insane. If you've listened to so far of this podcast, I have a feeling you're interested in it. And if that's true, please consider leaving a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. Now let's get back to the episode. The other incredibly stupid argument you'll hear leftists make that somehow is even worse than that one is, you can't legislate morality. You're trying to legislate morality. Don't listen to that guy. He's trying to legislate morality. Dirty fascist. As if that's some obvious fact that everyone should know. As if legislating morality is some scary, tyrannical thing we could never, ever, under any circumstances do. Actually, yes, we can legislate morality. Not only should we legislate morality, we have to legislate morality, or civilization dies. And you agree with that. Everyone agrees we should have laws against things like murder. unless it's defenseless babies who are being murdered, then everyone agrees murder should be illegal. So ask yourself this: why does everyone agree that murder should be illegal? The answer is simple. Murder is morally wrong. You can't squirm your way out of this one, no matter how hard you try. This is game over for you. You can try to say, oh, well, we have laws against murder because murder hurts people and it's bad for society and so on, but that doesn't work, I'm sorry. Because then you have to ask, why should I care what hurts people? And why should I care what's bad for society? The answer is because it's morally wrong to not care about hurting people or to not care about causing harm to society. So there's no escape for the liberals on this one. It all comes down to murder is immoral, so we should have laws against it. It all comes down to murder is immoral, so we should legislate morality to make sure people don't do it. If you think there should be laws against murder, that means you agree that morality needs to be legislated. And it's not just murder. Every single law that any government in the history of the world ever enacts ever is an example of legislating morality. Laws against murder, theft, assault, arson, kidnapping, home invasion, fraud, perjury, treason, drug trafficking, domestic violence, abuse, and every other crime on the face of the planet only exist because all of those things are immoral, and every sane person on Earth, whether he realizes it or not, whether he admits it or not, knows that we need to legislate morality. Saying that our laws can never legislate morality is the same exact thing as saying that all laws whatsoever should be abolished and we should have total anarchy. So yes, I do think we should legislate morality for the simple reason that I'm not an idiot. And if you're not an idiot, you agree. Of course, this doesn't mean that every single wrong thing should be banned by the government. Not every immoral thing rises to the level that the state has a right to get involved, obviously. But a lot more things rise to that level than people think, than most conservatives even think. When immorality threatens life, when it threatens the innocence of children, when it threatens the nuclear family or the moral fabric of our nation, the state doesn't just have a right, it has a duty to act. Abortion, euthanasia, and transgenderism definitely do rise to that level, even by the logic of Enlightenment liberalism, because all of them involve violence, mutilation, and harm against innocent people. But even a lot of non-violent things that are eating away at the moral fabric of our country rise to that level. Things like so-called gay marriage and gay adoption, adultery, public obscenity, drug use, and so on. These evils pose an existential threat to the morality and virtue of our country. Laws restricting or banning things like these wouldn't attack liberty, they would reinforce it. When liberty is ordered toward the good, the likelihood of tyranny doesn't increase, it decreases. As Patrick Henry said, it is when a people forget God that tyrants forge their chains. So those who worship unlimited state power have a vested interest in destroying the moral fiber of the country they govern. They want to destroy all social hierarchy and authority. They want to end all moral responsibility and accountability. They want to atomize the individual by breaking up the nuclear family, destroying traditional gender roles, dissolving Christianity, rooting out everything that instills meaning and value and moral clarity in people's lives, and then convincing the people they are slowly but steadily enslaving to go along with all of it enthusiastically by lying to them and claiming that they're just giving them more choices and giving them more liberty, when literally they are actually destroying liberty. Then, once they've accomplished this, the only source of authority, the only source of truth, becomes the omnipotent power of the government. God is dethroned and Caesar is deified in his place. Because of this, the true believers in liberty and limited government recognize the necessity of ordering that liberty toward the good through laws like this. And statists who worship unlimited government power will strongly oppose any attempt to protect virtue and morality, because a moral and virtuous people cannot be enslaved. This explains why modern leftists want communism and unlimited state power over every aspect of our lives, but at the same time are somehow total anarchists on so many other issues. This is why they're total authoritarians, but they allow criminals to turn their cities into crime-ridden cesspools, and why they welcome millions of criminal alien invaders with open arms to destroy our nation and its culture. This is why California is an anarcho-tyranny. The leftists like Gavin Newsom who run it know that the only way to realize their vision of globalism and communism is to destroy morality and national identity. This also explains why true conservatives, who want radically limited government and the destruction of the deep state, support mass deportations and bans on certain moral depravities. Both groups understand that liberty cannot exist without virtue. So the people who want to destroy liberty want to destroy virtue, and the people who want to restore liberty want to restore virtue. In short, not only is license, or the leftist concept of liberty, totally different than real liberty, license is the opposite of liberty. It isn't the right to do what we ought, it's the right to do what we ought not. It's a form of tyranny that's all the more destructive because the people suffering under it have no idea that they're slaves. The equation of liberty with license has completely destroyed the moral fiber of our country. This is the lie that destroyed America. Leftists have exploited the people's ignorance on this topic to justify abortion, transgenderism, so-called gay marriage and gay adoption, drug legalization, feminism, and a million other terrible things. In all these cases, our betters told us that we were required to tolerate and accept these glaring evils and the people who committed them because we needed to respect the rights and liberty of people we disagreed with, like good, obedient Americans. Even when they inflict irreversible harm on innocent children, we can't judge. We have to stand back and allow women to murder their unborn children by the tens of millions because it's our duty to respect their choices. We have to accept or even tolerate transgenderism and LGBT cultism because we're told that's their right. You can point to a million other examples. These are just two of the most prominent ones. To sum up, the right and the left have two warring ideas of liberty. The left sees liberty as a license, dysfunction, sin, and depravity. True right-wingers see liberty as inseparable from religion, virtue, and morality. The left sees liberty as the power to do bad. The right sees liberty as the freedom to do good. For decades, Americans have been brainwashed and emotionally blackmailed into supporting the left's vision of liberty, with catastrophic consequences for our society. If our country is to survive much longer, right-wingers need to fight both for limited government and moral order. It's only then that we can restore true liberty to our land. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Conservative Rebel. If you liked it, please leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast. It helps the show out enormously and helps us reach even more people. Thanks again.